It's nice to know that somebody's got your back. Somebody did, no matter what. It's 3 in the morning.
I stayed home all day. They were fine by the time I came
They'll
here.
be there for me. That's rare. That's really rare
Less traffic out.
to have 3.
We're a good little trio.
Yeah, I looked up at that.
The 3 Musketeers.
The 3 Musketeers.
The winter roads check.
Right.
Routine. Let's hope that's
Okay.
an aberration for a few months.
I would like to call the Linn-Mar School Board regular meeting to order. Will you please determine a quorum?
Foltz.
Here.
Eisenberg.
Here.
Lawson. Here. Maury.
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
Wall.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Quorum is present at 7 o'clock.
Make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
All right. So we begin with,
Vote on that.
okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Move on to audience communication, and we did have 4 different people send things to be read to us tonight.
First one is from Rachel Blackford. Our family is so grateful we can be back in person. We have 2 high school students and an elementary student. I'm writing you about the length of class time for the high school. Would there ever be consideration in making the high school day a normal length and the kids can have their class time back? Even if it stays hybrid, I feel it would help the teachers reach the kids better. With the shortened class times, my kids are only getting 15 to 20 minutes after attendance with a teacher, and some classes it is only an ask questions time after they view an example. My 16-year-old son, who has been an honor student, is expected to learn and manage time at the collegiate standards, and he mentally is not ready for that level and failing. Teachers are doing a ton of work to try to reach the kids, and I think they're doing a great job putting in a lot of time with what they have. I just feel the kids are doing a lot of teaching to themselves, and the teachers do not get to showcase their teaching talents. These are unprecedented times, and we are so appreciative on how Linn-Mar is keeping our kids and teachers safe. The next one is from Angie Martin. I have 3 students in the Linn-Mar School District, 2 at the high school and 1 at Hazel Point, and I would just like to express my desire for you to approve sending the middle school and high school students back to school full-time in person starting 2nd quarter. We need to look at the positivity rate within the district and use that information when making a decision as well. I believe recent communications stated there have been approximately 13 cases in high school out of approximately 2,200 students, a 0.5% positivity rate. These students are not getting a quality education, having 25-minute in-person classes and online instruction every other day. We have students taking AP level classes, and 25-minute classes are not even sufficient for them to complete quizzes, tests, in that amount of time. How are we going to know if in-person can be successful if we don't try? We need to put forth a better effort for these kids. The elementary and intermediate schools seem to be operating safely, and they have been in person for 4 weeks now. Also, have any of the students or staff that have tested positive for COVID-19 been hospitalized, or have they been generally mild cases? Is it typically spread from student to student, or have there been any cases spread from student to teacher / staff or vice versa? I hope all of this information is taken into account when making a decision, as well as keeping in mind the emotional, mental, and social effects that the decision may have on students now and in the future. Next one is from M.S. Bauer. My daughter plays basketball on a youth team coached by Todd Miller. I wanted to take a moment of your time to share my viewpoint on the closing of reduced Linn-Mar gym situation. I understand navigating the logistics of this pandemic is an enormous challenge. I understand you're making decisions based on input from many sources, some of which most of us aren't even privy to. I also understand it's impossible for you to make a decision that appeals to everyone. I wanted to ask you to consider input from one more source, a regular dad. A dad to the shortest girl in her class that loves to play a tall girl's game, basketball. I'm not a doctor, nor am I an infectious disease expert. I work in outdoor power equipment. My children are in classrooms with other students weekly. I feel as long as our children are in school daily, weekly practices wouldn't add any risk or be an issue in regard to my daughter's or others' health. The issue to me is more than the overcrowded gyms with limited operations. It's more than the lack of practices my daughter and her team need. The issue to me is they aren't getting the basketball time they want. My daughter's of the age where if interest and drive are both there, if you have children, you certainly understand, the timely development of skills is paramount and court time is paramount. My other daughter dances, and despite her passion and love for dance, no studio time meant faded interest. How many normally stellar students struggle with online learning, no actual class time, faded interest, focus gets lost? I fear the same fate with my daughter in basketball. As the children are involved in sports, we as parents are equally involved. As parents, we volunteer our time as well as contribute financially. These kids are the future Linn-Mar High School athletes, and we as parents are future booster club organizers, concession stand workers, etc. These children athletes are future Iowa Hawkeyes, Cyclones, or in our case, UConn basketball players. And I'd hate to see all that potential suppressed because they can't get on a court to practice that isn't outside on a 30-degree day. I can't speak for all parents, but certainly can for the ones in my circle. We would be glad to volunteer our efforts to clean up the gym after a weekly practice. Leave us a checklist. I was in the military, I can follow orders, and we'll get it done. If we don't hold up our end of the deal, simply take the space back. We could sign a waiver like I do to get my hair cut, or if we need to get together and settle on a predetermined cost to use the courts, we are open to that as well. Please consider reviewing and revising the current gym policy because it's more than just giving us a court to play basketball on. It's cultivating potential in a time where so much is unfamiliar and uncertain. Again, thank you for your time. And the last one is from Todd Miller. The parents and players of the Linn-Mar youth girls basketball team's grades would like the Linn-Mar School Board to reconsider their decision to not let youth teams utilize the gymnastics for team practices at this time. There are currently 14 girls basketball teams that are affected by this decision, roughly 140 players in grades 3rd through 8th. This also affects the youth boys basketball teams, which is likely a larger number of teams than the girls. We do not believe kids are made safer by the decision to close Linn-Mar gyms, since they are now practicing in gyms outside of the school district that are more crowded, less ventilated, and likely not cleaned well. We understand trying to keep kids in school and safe during this COVID-19 pandemic is an overwhelming and costly task. We are willing to share that in effort and cost, some examples being parents are willing to pay more for gym rentals if needed to cover the extra cleaning costs. Parents are willing to be trained to perform the extra cleaning after practices. Parents are willing to sign additional liability waivers if need be. We see other school districts that have found a way to open up their gyms for youth teams, Prairie, Waukee, Johnston, Urbandale, to name a few, and we believe that Linn-Mar should be able to do the same. Thank you for considering this. The parents and players of the Linn-Mar youth girls basketball teams. One other question for you. Many of the parents wanted to come to the school board meeting on 10/26 to have a large group there to show how important this topic is to us, but we realize this is not a good idea with the COVID-19 situation. What is the best way for these parents to express their support for opening the gyms? Should each parent send an individual email to you, the entire board, or someone else? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Carla.
Yep.
We appreciate it. Okay, we will move on to informal reports. The first one is the Marion City Council, and that was, I was in charge of doing that one. And I looked through information, and there really wasn't much that was just exactly had to do with Linn-Mar, other than a comment that the mayor made in their communications that had to do with a group of Iowa Big students that's organizing a fundraising event that will bring, this is interesting, everybody, chainsaw artists to carve tree stumps. The final projects will be auctioned, and the proceeds will be used to help replant the tree canopy. Sounds like a neat idea.
Yeah.
It will be held at Marion Square Park throughout a week to yet to be determined in November. So I thought that was kind of a neat thing
That
to
is
bring
neat.
forth that has to do with Iowa Big students. So other than that, we didn't have anything else that was about Linn-Mar. So cabinet update would be the next thing.
Yeah, I have several things to provide the board an update on. First of kind of my annual bi-weekly message for you, I guess, is construction update. As we wrap up Boulder Peak and Hazel Point projects. Boulder Peak, again, you saw that a couple weeks ago, in great shape, just they continue to work on a few final pieces to wrap that building up. Hazel Point has made a lot of progress as well. Had another construction meeting again today. The gym at Boulder Peak is done. The gym at Hazel Point is getting close to being done. They're doing a punch list tomorrow on the floor and the paint. And then they'll start to put the seal coats on as soon as that punch list gets cleared too. So both buildings are rapidly approaching final ownership required pieces that need to be done. So that's been encouraging. Still continue to piece together some of the storm damage repair work. The rain keeps identifying new areas for us to identify more work to be done. So that's helpful in some ways before winter and frustrating in some other ways as well. That we're making progress there as we approach the winter time. So overall, in a much better spot than we were 2 or 4 weeks ago too. So feel good about that. It'll be really nice to wrap up at Hazel Point in the gym. It's those PE teachers, as you will see on Thursday, they've been very creative in how they've done things, but now it's getting colder and harder to be outside very much. So there's only so much you can do in hallways. So that'll be exciting to get in there. A couple other all over the board kind of topics for you today, a little bit of a smorgasbord. Updated COVID numbers. You have the updated metric sheet in front of you. Pretty much every meeting going forward, I'll just bring an updated version of that for you to reference with that day's updated metric. As you can see in the middle, it should be the only thing that will change. 8.4% is our metric number we checked this morning. And again, that number is the measure that's straight from Linn County Public Health. It's linked on the document. That is the 14-day average of the positivity rate in Linn County is where we pull that number from. I know there's lots of different metrics. That's where that number comes from. And we're using that one because that's the number the state asks us to use if we are going to make a change. So that's just an FYI for you for that information. And you notice that is quite an increase from 7 to 10 days ago when our numbers were in the 5s and 6s. So hopefully that number will not continue to climb at this rate. We will see. Other update for you along the lines of COVID and changes as we wrap up close to the end of the first quarter. Families that are in the family choice model have the option to return in person in K-6. We started with 1,050 students online in the K-6 model. After the option for families to return, we had 219 students request to return in person. So a pretty good percentage of our online students. It's a large number, so that becomes interesting next steps for us then to look at as far as class assignments and then potential impacts of teacher adjustments that may need to be made as well. It becomes a little more manageable when you realize we can spread that out over 7 grade levels in 9 buildings, so those numbers become less in each building, each grade level. We also want to be respectful of the class sizes to make sure that those don't get to be increased too much. So that's the process we're working through right now, is trying to get a real good handle on those numbers and which grade levels and which buildings, and then begin to, over the course of the next week and a half or so, really try to hammer out what that looks like as far as what changes need to be made. So we know there will be some teacher assignments that need to be adjusted. That's not ideal mid-year anytime, but this is just such a unique year. We know those changes will have to be addressed. So reminder of the timeline, roughly through from now till November 6th, we'll be working with building principals to make those adjustments and then start to communicate that with staff and with families the following week of November 9th to the 13th, possibly sooner, but that's our deadline to work with, and November 16th is the first day of the second quarter. So we have a lot of work to do over the course of the next couple of weeks to make those adjustments mid-year.
And then, like, prioritizing, obviously, the staff that is going to get moved.
Can you say that again, Kara?
Prioritizing the communication with the staff that would get moved in one way or the other. Like, the staff that's going to be, like, directly affected. I know that sometimes it can be hard to, like, get a messaging out that's not intended for everybody right away, but, like, as soon as we can communicate to our staff what their second quarter is going to look like, the better, I think. Especially with the people that their assignment is going to be changing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Bob Reed shared today with all the online teachers what their changes in course rosters, class rosters will look like, so they have that information. but they do not know who's going to be potentially moved or assignment. So as soon as we can make those decisions, they'll be the first ones to know, because obviously that's a significant change in their daily assignment as well. So they will be the priority, and then the families right after that. So, just a clarification and reminder that there is new guidance out from the CDC about a little bit change in stance as far as the quarantine requirements. I should say the exposure requirements. The 6 feet for 15 consecutive minutes has been changed to 6 feet for 15 total minutes. I'll only bring that up because Iowa Department of Public Health and Linn County Public Health do not plan to follow those new guidelines. So that puts us in a unique spot, but we need to follow Linn County Public Health's guidelines because they are the ones to determine who quarantines and who does not. So we'll continue to work with them and stay in contact with them as well as we go forward. But that's there's been a little bit of confusion out there with families as those different agencies have different advice that makes things confusing. So we'll continue to follow Linn County Public Health, and we'll continue to follow Iowa Department of Public Health guidance as well. And that's our marching orders for us to follow, essentially.
I think it's really important to clarify. I know this is just supposed to be us talking, but we have people watching. To clarify that it's not a choice that we get to make. We don't get to sit here and say we're going to follow the CDC, or we can choose we have to follow Linn County Public Health. I think that's a really important thing for the community to understand. Like, we're not choosing to ignore the CDC. We're required to follow Linn County Public Health.
Especially when it comes to the quarantine option. They're the
Yeah.
ones that determine who
Like, we don't
should
get that off.
quarantine.
We don't decide who quarantines. We have no authority there. I think that's really important for people to understand.
Yeah, we provide the information, we provide the scenario, and then they determine who is actually in need of quarantine. Is
Yeah.
correct. Yep.
Sorry, I know we all know that, but I'm just,
Yep, good to reiterate that for everybody as well. So, October 15th, this is October 1st and the 15th are big days in the world of superintendency as far as enrollment numbers go. Typically, we see an increase of enrollment, as you guys know, with our growth. This year is very much an aberration. We are down students this year, as you know, down approximately 71 students. And again, that's not an actual measure of number of students in seats or in classrooms, as much as it is a measure of our resident students that we have, but that does determine our funding for the following year. So just keep that in mind as we go forward and work through, like our work session conversation today. Earlier, one of the priority areas that a couple of us identified was that fiscal responsibility piece, and this will be a tough year for us financially for many reasons. One, increasing the number of staff as we have for 2 new buildings, all the COVID and derecho expenses, and then to add on top of that, a decrease in students will put an impact on us of about $500,000 difference there as well. So those will be things that as we approach our legislative session will become really important for board members and myself to make sure we advocate the importance of school funding, short-term and long-term, because we are by no means alone in this situation. I think I shared with you a week or so ago, the other schools in the UEN, larger schools in Iowa, everybody saw a decrease in enrollment. In fact, we were the one that, of the schools reported, had the least impact. Others were in that 100 to 200 to 400 range of decrease of students as well. So this is not a Linn-Mar problem. This is a statewide challenge. And if you've watched nationwide reports, they're seeing that across the country as well. So something we're going to have to be very targeted with our advocacy. Right now, the Grant-Wood superintendents and UEN are both working on kind of common platforms to prepare to use after the election's over. And as we approach that legislative session this winter, that'll be really important for us to prioritize. So it will be a challenge for everybody going forward. Now, the real interesting thing becomes what happens a year from now. Will we see students return to school? Will schools not see that bounce back? There's a lot of unknowns there too that we'll have to try to track down. That's what we're in the process of right now, is determining where those students went to. Are they going to online programs? Are they open enrolled someplace else? Are they homeschooling? We have several that just disappeared essentially, especially after the derecho damage as well. So we're in the process of tracking down, trying to get a handle of the causes behind that as well. 71 is a big number, but you start dividing that by 13 grade levels, doesn't take many kids per grade level, and all of a sudden that adds up pretty quickly too. So I know the board members are aware of that, but just a good reminder for all of us as we move forward, that will be a key talking point for us and a key role for us in advocacy. So,
As soon as you know like what the strategy is, like what the
Yeah.
ask is, if you can share that with us, because obviously there's a number of different ways to approach it, whether it's, you know, through a dramatically increased state supplemental aid or like some kind of unique thinking outside the
Yep.
box legislation, like whatever we're gonna have as our ask, that way we can all
absolutely.
contact everybody.
And I think this year more than ever, it's important to be consistent with that with our across the board for districts, because this approach will be unique, because this is not something that is typically seen. This loss of enrollment, the state of Iowa has actually been growing student enrollment for several years. The estimated number right now is across Iowa, about 6,000 less students will be in the schools. So that's a lot less funds that the state would need to commit to public education in this year as well. So how does that get addressed going forward too? Is that short-term procedures, or is that more long-term guidance? There's been a lot of ideas bandied around, but there's not been a set recommended talking points yet. So once we get those, I'll be glad to share those. So we're speaking the same language with our legislators too.
Is it,
So,
would it be useful if any of us reached out and just asked our legislators what their plan is? Because they are like representing us and should have some sort of a plan, and maybe, you know, we can kind of ask as
Yeah.
they're getting ready for the session, like, what are you thinking to, because obviously, like you're saying, like, this isn't an us problem, this is a statewide issue, so.
I don't think it ever hurts to reach out and just touch base and ask questions like that. The only thing we've discussed as a superintendent group is anything before the election is probably going to get surface level treatment at best, but still doesn't hurt to plant the seed potentially. So I think more
Yeah,
after the election would be a good time to
No
really
one's
push.
going to commit until they see the breakdown in the House and the Senate
Yep.
and see, you know, who's in power.
And they start their caucus process
Well,
as
some,
well.
like Liz Mathis is running unopposed, like, there are people that we can feel that, you
No,
know,
and
we
we
can
wanna
at least
talk to
start
Liz, I
having
guess.
the conversation with.
But her approach will be, I mean, it'll be the same primary message, but whether, if Republicans are in control or like, that's what they're waiting to see,
Well,
is how far do
hopefully-
they want to go at different things.
Hopefully, supporting our schools will be a bipartisan issue.
I would love if it was a bipartisan issue.
There's two thoughts on that. Today, there was a comment I read that said the Department of Roads is pleasantly surprised at the revenue they've received. So that's a positive note. And this 6,000 students you're talking about, that's not a small number. That's $42 million.
Exactly.
So that's a huge pool of money that can be divvied someplace possibly, right? So
Correct.
Anyway.
Which would cost the
Start
state no
asking
more
for it
money.
now.
Yeah.
It could be
Yeah.
allocated to help, because everybody's costs have gone up.
Yeah.
Just the funding to support it is going to go down now if we don't get some changes made as well. So,
Is there a way to communicate exactly districts and how much they're losing student-wise too? Because, you know, here we say 71, and if we're on the low end, you know, I think the patrons of our district need to know that, because it shows the viability of our district and the quality of our district in some respects, that we have fewer than anybody else close to us that are still here. And I just think that it's, you know, important for the patrons of the district to know that, to know where Linn-Mar is in conjunction with others, because I think in the back of some people's minds, there's always doubts as to what's going on. And this allows, you know, the patrons to know that, hey, yes, 71 is a lot, but these other districts are worse. So, you know, it's kind of a positive thing to throw on it, if at all possible.
yeah, I think once we get kind of a platform to share with everybody, that'd be good information to share as well, because I know that if I call, talk to a legislator, that has some impact. If you guys call and talk to a legislator, that has a little more typically open ears to that. And if a parent calls, that even has more power, I think, a lot of times as well.
Well, I think,
So the more
like you said,
we can help
parents,
advocate, the better.
that's taxpayers too. That's more than just the 7 of us and our cabinet. So if parents get behind that, You know, that, I think that would be a good push. You know, like Carol was talking about, you get parents behind this calling in and saying, hey, we want this for our kids, come on now. You know, and they know that that's where the votes are, you know, it can't hurt. It can only do the Linn-Mar district good things.
Agreed.
And a call or an email is a pretty easy way to do that.
Our
No financial
representatives are really
burden on
good
the
about
people.
their town hall sessions are really good in our area. They're open, and so I think that's important as well. Like, drive to your library on a Saturday morning and talk to your representative about school.
Yeah, that'll be interesting this year to see too, will those sessions still be held in their current format? Will that look differently,
I know
more
Liz
virtual?
is still doing virtual ones.
Yep.
I've gone to a couple of our representatives, and they've been doing them virtually, so I would assume that that would stay. I'm more interested to see if, when session starts, if the Capitol opens up and we can actually go and talk to people, because there's some hesitation there,
Yep.
so.
Yeah, they've talked about that too with usually superintendents meet with legislators on Fridays during the session. There's concern to whether that will happen as well or not this year, or if that has to be done in other formats, which if we have to, we will, so.
Yeah, this is that topic that if we can get in the building and go and talk to people in Des Moines, like, this is the topic to talk about.
Yep. It'll be pretty focused conversations this year, I think, for us as we approach legislators. A couple other quick updates for you. Middle school sports and activities. As you know, we did not have middle school fall sports or activities this year, just with all the unknowns and getting back to school. We are looking to start winter sports and activities at the middle school level, but in a little different format. Looking to have it be a little more controlled right away to begin with. We're looking to start practices in basketball and swimming for both boys and girls. That part is usual for us right now. I don't mention wrestling yet because that typically comes later in the winter for middle school athletes, so we'll follow up on that once we get closer to that. But as far as the basketball and the swimming goes, trying to find ways to have smaller groups, so stay with an A-B format like we are with the hybrid right now for middle school athletes to keep the numbers down in the gym, still follow our guidance on masks and usage as well. And then we are looking to do more of a competitions within our district rather than travel. Part of that is our concern about travel and competition, but really the other piece of it is most of our games are against Cedar Rapids schools, and they are not having middle school winter sports this year either, so that changes the dynamics a little bit as well. Hoping these will go well, hoping to give kids opportunities to get out and play, practice, work on some skills. One of the challenges we will have is coaching-wise, making sure we have enough staff to operate at the level we want to. That's no different than each of our buildings day-to-day right now as we try to make sure we have enough staff available to cover everything too. So excited to give that a try. We'll start pretty controlled, and then we'll see if we can expand that as well with different clubs as activities too. So
What's nice about that is with the swimming thing, when we started the school year, Kennedy, Jeff, and Wash were having meets and working out in our facility, our aquatic center, and we had already handled all the safety with the COVID-19, and so when our middle school kids are going to go swimming, we've already got that addressed and should make hopefully a great experience for our middle school kids, but the safety factor's already been used and dealt with and handled, and we had no problems with that outside of the lights going out that one night, but so
it can happen
hopefully.
anytime. So, yep. The other one I mentioned, I heard a couple of comments tonight from the audience as well. Gym rentals and kind of our plan for that, for facility use. We would love to open up and have our teams practice and use our facilities like we have in the past. I think that would be everybody's goal and ideal to do. We spent a lot of time as an athletic council, administrators and ADs really talking through the different scenarios there from a facility use. At this time, we do not plan to open those facilities again until January at the earliest. Rationale behind that is two main reasons kind of driving that. The first one is just the ability to enforce our guidelines that we have as far as mask usage and guidance without having staff there to supervise every single group in every single building every single night. And then the second challenge is How do we clean after every single group and prepare for school the next day? Making sure that our gyms, our hallways, our foyers, our restrooms are all cleaned and sanitized like they need to be before school starts the following day. Our resources are spread pretty thin this year, as you know. Worried about as we get into the winter season, that's going to be even more challenging. So trying to be pretty cautious on how we make sure we can have our schools ready to function every day to keep schools open. It's simply our rationale behind that piece. If our middle school sports pieces go well, our COVID numbers are at a level of acceptance later on, I think we can certainly revisit that facility use piece again, see if there's ways we can try to find ways to cover the buildings too. So one of many things this year that are just not normal and tough decisions for us to have to make, and that's kind of where we stand right now. So wanted to keep you up to date kind of where that topic stands. We hope to be able to change that as the year goes on. So last one I'll throw out there is a positive, kind of a breaking news one for you a little bit. All state music was announced today or released or will be released. We have unofficial count is 48 Linn-Mar High School students qualified for all state music this year. Another very impressive number. That official list will be coming out, I would guess, the next 24, 48 hours on that as well. So we look forward to honoring those students and recognizing them even in a unique year for them as well. So congratulations to those individuals. That's a massive number of students to be recognized. So congratulations. And that's all I have for update this time.
Okay. And next we are going to have a discussion about our return to learn plan, updates, recommendations, that kind of thing. So Shane?
Yep, back to me again. Kind of a continuation from earlier conversations for us. I'll kind of cover a few highlights for you before we get to our next agenda item as well. A lot of things this year wrap around the first quarter. As you know, the board made a commitment to operate our middle school and high schools at a hybrid model of both in-person and online learning to start the year throughout the first quarter for the middle school and high school level. In elementary and intermediate, we are back in person across the district or family choice model for folks. As we approach that second quarter, we have some decisions we need to make. We need to make them so people can plan both at the school level and the family level. Right now, our elementary and intermediate school structure is working well, so we do not have any other changes there except for the number of families that are choosing to change their model, as I mentioned earlier. But the middle school and high school, we do need to revisit and have that conversation. So as we've talked through that, I've talked to principals and staff members, and principals have followed up with their staff on some informal surveys as far as what, and feedback as far as what models they think are working well, how do we move forward as well. So the feedback we're hearing from staff members and that I would support is continuing the hybrid model for the second quarter. It matches our metrics as you have in front of you. The difference there is I think we need to look at a commitment for a longer period of time for middle school and high school so we can plan accordingly. Some of the rationale behind this recommendation really come into the challenge of teaching both in person and online is a daunting task for staff members, and that task only becomes more challenging if the number of kids in person grows and becomes a larger to make that happen. Our current hybrid model is working as far as keeping students and staff safe. It's probably the most important piece as well, and that becomes harder to do if we bring everybody back, especially at the high school with the numbers that we have there. The other piece that's kind of a factor that we've really been talking about is this next stretch of time in the calendar is concerning as we approach winter and flu season, and our numbers are starting to climb. Holiday travel, gatherings for folks, those type of things do make me nervous about where things are going to go for us number-wise. So to make a change, to bring more people back right now, doesn't seem like the wise decision timing-wise for us either at this stage. The last thing I guess I'll mention for that piece is I think the focus for us becomes, instead of changing the model, is how do we improve our current model? What things can we look at doing? Whether that's more teacher support, more technology support and improvements, schedule changes to address things that now that we've learned what works, what doesn't work, what's the right amount of time for classes in person and online. Those are the type of changes we're looking at trying to improve as well. So there's kind of the talking points, kind of the rationale behind the conversations we've been having and looking at different ways to try to make the best of a really tough situation from a safety perspective and from an educational perspective. So with that, I will stop talking and open up to any questions you guys may have or thoughts as well.
I'm excited to hear that you investigated others through surveys with the principals, talking with others and that, then you've listened to what information they've gleaned, and you just made the statement that you were going to be improving the things that you felt weren't going well, and that I think listening to what everyone's saying and acting on it is really important. And to follow up with some of the same kinds of surveys, either to parents, students, staff, and, periodically for information learning, and then saying, okay, this is a theme that seems to be the same, and we need to really address this, or look at how much better this is. I think it's just that continue looking, communication and follow-up is really important. Others?
Yeah, I'll pile on to what Sandra said too,
Okay.
but, and I think the last comment you made, Shannon, I like how to improve the current model. I know there's things that we learned and we can tweak that,
Yes.
and I think that's a big thing I was excited to hear.
Mm-hmm.
I think I mentioned a board meeting or two ago, this whole year, as we go through everything, we'll get better at this whole new world of teaching online or teaching hybrid models, and how do we continue to grow and improve on that. It's obviously very difficult work for teachers, and there's ways we can continue to try to learn and make it better and more successful for kids and for staff alike. So,
But if we have suggestions that are made and you're acting on it and you're letting those things at least be tried, I think that's very productive all the way around. Anyone else?
Everybody kind of knows where I stand on this. I was really sincerely hoping we could get the kids back in school. And, and I appreciate, you exhausted every option. And it really goes on all three items, in my mind. First of all, it's getting the kids back in school full-time. Second of all, it's the athletic piece of it, or the gym space of it. And the third piece of it is, of course, getting some kind of a competition for the kids as well. And, I guess what really is driving me on the situation is the success of what Linn-Mar has done since the day school opened. Our numbers are very small, and I think the statement was made that we have not had a child contract the virus in school. Most of the viruses came from outside. And that's a compliment, because the kids that are in school, along with the teachers that are in school, are not getting it from that child. So that means the cleaning's good, the distancing's good, the staff is doing everything they can on all of those pieces. And I really appreciate the piece that we're trying to keep the children safe. But the next piece of it is, are we educating all the children in our district? And the answer to that is, I don't think so. I think there are kids that are going to be behind. And at this point, it seems to me like the online piece of it is trumping the in-class piece of it. And that concerns me just a little bit, because, I know of kids that are in school, and some of them are not finishing classes because the hour and a half, whatever it is being shortened for whatever reason. And yet, I have to be careful with that, because I'm not a teacher and I'm not directly involved. I'm just getting information from a variety of families. But I just, and I hope if we make this decision, and this is locked this evening, that we're not going to do it through the end of the second quarter. I hope we can really keep looking at it, and if that puts a lot of pressure on the leadership team, I apologize. But I think we need to keep watching the numbers, we need to keep talking about it, and if we can evolve in the third or fourth or fifth week into the quarter, is that a possibility we could evolve at that point? I don't know if that's feasible, but that's just a thought that I have. Because well, it's been a tough year, all the way since February and March. And there's some children that are just really upset. There's children that really want to be in school. And decisions are made on a variety of levels, between mothers and fathers, the children themselves, and or our organization. And that's what's really tough, because we're affecting a lot of numbers and a lot of lives in this. And we really want to see our children grow and learn. And we're squelching a little bit of that. And I know we can't, that's not taking anything away from our teachers, because they're doing everything in their power, but how do we make sure we make that smoother and keep it moving forward?
Okay, thank you.
So,
Is there, can we like talk about what parents can do? Because, so there are, I don't like disagree that there are undoubtedly students that are struggling, right? But there are, for that, there are just as many students that are successful in this model. So if your child is struggling in this model and they're in this 7 through 12, like what are their options? I know that depending on the learning model that they're in, whether they have accommodations or whatever, there's varieties of things that they can do, but if, so, you know, we talked tonight about what to do if people come to us, so if parents are coming to us and their child is struggling, and they've tried talking, you know, like, obviously, if my problem is with my teacher, I'm gonna be hard pressed to come to them and say, hey, you're not doing such a great job, so like, I guess, what would you recommend to parents of kids that are struggling in this model and what they can do? I know we've seen emails from the high school, like, if you have given your student release for RTI and they're not doing well, please rescind it. And so some of it is like, there's different strategies that parents can kind of invoke, and if maybe we can kind of talk about those for a second, that might be helpful.
It really depends on which building you're at as far as the current structure and the current supports that are in place. But either, regardless of the building though, the first conversation is, like you said, with their classroom teacher. Not so much that the teacher's not doing well, but what other options do they have to try to help their student be more successful? Whether that's coming back for that RTI session at the high school, that's kind of the second round scheduling piece of it. There are the resources to support. There are opportunities, different ways to try to meet that student's needs. If that's not enough, following up with the counselor or the building principal or social principal at that level as well to talk through what else needs to happen besides the current core curriculum piece that's taking place. So, and I think that's only makes sense as that people get used to this new structure and new model, that there are going to be some that are going to thrive and there are going to be others that are going to struggle with that. And those ones that are struggling, we have to find ways to make sure to address that at the individual level and the family level to help support what that looks like as well. So
People should like not stop advocating, because maybe there are like additional supports that they don't have in place or they didn't know were possible that, you know, like somebody on Lisa's team can kind of get looped in. So I don't want anybody to feel like just because we're continuing, or Shannon is recommending that we continue the hybrid model for the end of the second quarter, that we're like leaving people out to dry. Because I don't think that's anybody's intention, but like Shannon, or Sandra had said, like, we need to be asking people questions about how they're doing, because not everybody is comfortable coming forward other than maybe in casual conversation, or, so just kind of getting those supports out there so people know how to access them.
the last thing we want to do is set students up for failure and make sure we're not closing those doors for communication to help support, regardless of whether we come back with all students or stay in the hybrid. That's the piece that there'll be stressors, there'll be anxiety there for either option we would choose to do. So we have to make sure to continue to make sure people realize to advocate and communicate with people that are necessary as well to be successful.
Wouldn't also some of the tweaks, I think, that you guys are looking at, whether, I don't know what they are, but I think that you would learn, and that would say, okay, so here's what maybe students had problems with or teachers had problems with, and so these, whether it's, I don't want to even speculate because I don't want to say something and be wrong, but I think that would also help, to go to your point as well, I would think.
yeah, that was
Yeah, we can
kind of,
definitely communicate that better to everybody as well as we go forward, what that looks like.
Well, that's one good thing about being in this model for a length of time, is that we've seen what works and we've seen what we need improvement on. We just need the communication between our staff members and the parents to continue to say, this is what we've learned, this is how we're going to improve upon this. And because I think that's one of the things we want our students improving all the time. And our teachers want the same thing, but they also want to make it better for our students. So if they're communicating to one another, this is what I learned, I think we need to, adjust this, or here's some ideas to float out there. I think that helps, because, the teachers are in a new situation themselves, okay? but to know that somebody's also has some of the same ideas or having some of the same problems in their community, that they don't feel like they're on an island all by themselves. And I think that open communication with the staff members on this, like you put it, improve on the current model, because as I look at the second quarter, it's difficult to change after 2 or 3 weeks, after people are used to something, and then boom, right away. It's putting a lot of pressure on staff, but it's also putting a lot of pressure on the kids. Kids do adjust faster than adults, but it's still a pressure there. With what you said in regards to Thanksgiving and Christmas and stuff like that, it behooves me to support, we go through this the second quarter, see how we're improving. Before the second quarter's over, we'll have more statistics and more information to see how we want to progress through the third and fourth quarter. Like Barry, I would like, as soon as we can, get the kids back in the classroom. But I think what we're doing is working, and as Barry pointed out, our numbers as far as COVID problems are low, and I think that's because our students are doing a good job, our staff is doing a good job. And so we've got some things rolling in the right place, but we still can improve. But I think we should continue that through the second quarter. Maybe, like Barry said, maybe the third and fourth week, we can start looking, or the fourth and fifth week, we could start looking at, hey, this is happening in our district now. We might be able to do this and this, and just kind of go with that. And it gives us some time to do that. But there's not going to be any drastic adjustments for the students, and not drastic adjustments for the staff. And I think some semblance of normalcy that we can have, because we're continuing this process that they're already in, says something.
Well, I think another thing we have to remember is, even if we bring if we end hybrid, teachers are still teaching dual models, because the kids are still virtual, and it's still simultaneously taught. So you're still going to have the teacher with the microphone and the earbud and the laptop and the whole whatever their situation is.
Just more people to control in front of them.
Yeah, so I mean, right now 60% of their kids are on the computer. It just changes which ones are on there every other day. So I think that's an important thing to remember, is that bringing them all back doesn't end the dual task that we're putting on teachers. I do want to say that I am listening to the parents of the kids that are struggling, and I think we all are. And it is a concern, but what makes me feel better about that is Shannon saying, now we can improve upon, we can take what we've learned and look at how we can do better. And I think that, you even mentioned looking at the schedule. So we've heard several comments about the 25-minute class periods and the RTI, and for some that's working really well. I think at a past board meeting, Shannon, you said that we've had the most individual student-teacher interaction through this RTI that we've seen in a long time. Like, more students are taking advantage of that. So, and I think second quarter is, it's the hardest quarter to shift anything in the middle of, because we have 2 breaks. And so that 3 or 4 week window is going to be smack dab in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So it's already all out of whack. I hear the concerns from parents, but I think that I'm going to agree with the recommendation that staying with the hybrid and continuing to learn what we can learn. I also have this nagging thing in the back of my head that says maybe Linn County is doing really well because Cedar Rapids High School students aren't in their buildings. And what happens when they all come back? And
I guess we'll see.
so, I mean, it's just this thing that pops into my head every once in a while. I think, well, a lot of the teenagers in Linn County are still at home. Some of them are still out and about, yes, but it's a consideration. So, yeah, I'm in favor of taking Shannon's recommendation and giving a lot of weight to the part of that recommendation that says we're learning and we're improving in the areas that we identify as we are struggling in these areas still, we can do better. We've talked about the dual monitors being a solution. We've talked about improving the technology with the teachers. I think that's all great. And anything we can do, as Kara said, to listen to our parents and to talk to our students and say, what would make this better on your end? Because I think we are starting to get that on the teacher side. What can we do better to support you? Getting that same feedback from the teacher parent side and giving them, like Kara said, here are tips from the parents. Here's ways you can help. And then also taking in what more can we do to support your student and seeing what we can accomplish there. But I do think that the recommendation is the safest route at this time.
I appreciate your clarification of that, because the end of the second quarter will be in January when?
January 29th, I believe.
29th, okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, you know, your comments, we're not voting yet, of course, we'll be in a few minutes. But with all of your hard work and your cabinet's hard work and everybody's hard work, I'm supporting it as well. I just wanted to kind of clarify a few things and kind of give compliments to compliments where they are. Our schools are doing a fine job of keeping the numbers down, so we
And I would
just
agree
need to
with
keep
that.
working it.
And I'll echo, I heard several of you mention too, that the goal is to still bring students back to school, all of them back to school this year. And I don't want what we decide for the second quarter to automatically determine the third or the fourth quarter at all. We need to revisit that at the appropriate time and make those decisions too, because the goal is to still bring all kids back.
Well, I think
It's just a
another,
matter of, can we do that safely and when does that need to happen? So.
I think it's also kind of beneficial that the end of first quarter is so far into January that the holiday travel, we're going to get to see that before we have to make a full decision.
It's true.
We're going to get to see them come back and do we explode, or did people act responsibly over break so that they can stay in school? I think that would be my plea to families, is to make smart decisions so we can still stay open and maybe bring everybody back. So, yeah.
I personally feel like the kids should go back. I know that the Linn County numbers are increasing, but our numbers are not increasing, and there just really hasn't been much scientific data to suggest that schools are contributing to the spread, particularly when we are utilizing good policies and procedures such as mask wearing. And I guess I feel like I couldn't, you know, I said to you that I feel like I could be swayed on the matter, and I understand where you're coming from, but without having some concrete ideas of how the model is going to change to better educate, you know, all of our students, I would find it hard to vote in order to continue the hybrid. I think it's worth a shot to let the kids go back. You know, we can always change that decision, just like we can change the decision, you know what I mean, mid-quarter or whatever, to go from hybrid into an in-person. You know, we could do the same thing. I don't know, I guess, you know, I don't really feel like, it has nothing to do with how great our district is or our teachers or anything like that, but I just don't think that we can offer the same quality of education in the hybrid model as we can with in-person, and I do believe that there's a way for us to be in person safely. You know, I think the elementaries are a good example of that, and I know they don't have quite as many kids in them because of virtual, but I still think, I mean, the same would be, you know, it's not like all virtual students are going back anyway. I don't know, I feel like we have a duty to those students as well, and, you know, to kind of piggyback off of something that, you know, Barry said, it's, you know, I understand parents' desire to keep their kids at home. I 100% understand that and respect that, but that can't be the driver for everybody else's kids, for the decisions that we make about everybody else's kids, you know. Otherwise, we're not giving those kids and their parents a choice. So, and also, are we voting on this? Because I don't see
Not
a
yet.
vote
Next
here.
page.
Flip it
Next
over.
page, next page.
Oh, there
This
it is.
just- this
Okay.
At the top.
Thanks.
So I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Um, let's say we decided to go in person, starting second quarter. Would families who were only comfortable sending their kids back because we were using hybrid be able to elect to go fully online?
Can you say that for me again?
That's another layer.
Well, if we're gonna make a big decision for families, okay, so let's say a family only opted for in-person learning and not family choice,
Because of this hybrid.
7-12, because we said we were doing hybrid
Okay.
through first quarter. And then now we're gonna go back in person, they're watching the numbers rise. Do those families then have the option to go into family choice model?
I think we need to give them an option to
Okay,
change their
because I
their
think that's.
preference based on our stance as well.
Okay, because I think I'm not a high school parent, but I know how many kids are in our high school, and I think that there would be some serious concerns for parents if we said, we're going to send everybody back, and they were really only comfortable because half the building was not there. So if that was a consideration that we were going to entertain to send everyone back, I think that parents should have that reassurance, or, we should know what that answer is going to be, because we're going to get that question. Like,
Yep.
the second it's public, we're going to get that
Our building principals have
question.
already had that question from families, and their feeling is there would be a decent number that would want to make that change because of that as well.
Yeah.
So,
Maybe one of the things to help aid in this decision before we vote on it next week is, and I'm just basing this on the feedback I heard from a high school student, I'm sure everybody is wondering who it is. It's really crowded during passing time still. It's still crowded up and down stairwells, it's still crowded in the four corners. And so maybe seeing what the high school looks like I know we're not gonna do, I don't even wanna go into the high school when there are students there right now, but just like a visual for us board members, this is what the high school looks like right now with half of the students in it, I think might be helpful. And then I think Excelsior already changed their schedule, didn't they? And
They did.
maybe if you talk about that, that would kind of help explain like one of the improvements that
Yep.
we can expect to see.
each building's looking at different schedules, and Excelsior's already kind of instituted some changes, it's a week and a half ago, something like that, to just kind of change how they're doing the RTI or the support for the students that are needing the additional help as well, and then adding more time to the instructional piece as well for the core, and that's what the high school is looking at doing as well. We've heard a couple of comments from tonight from folks about that the skinny period is too skinny, essentially, and that's what high school is looking at doing now that they've got some weeks of experience under the belt. What is the right length of time for that? Some of the options, all the options they're looking at is a longer core time as well. I don't know that we'll look at going back to the full 40 whatever minutes it would be exactly, because I guess it would be a long time for the online experience for kids as well, but definitely a longer time period to extend that skinny period and the blocks both to a longer instructional time as well. But then that just shortens the RTI time, which can be dealt with in different scheduling pieces as well. And one of you mentioned the technology supports we're looking at as well. The monitors for teachers have been ordered. Might even be here. I can't remember if Jerry told me they're here yet or on their way. It's not just going to be a monitor. It's actually going to be kind of a full setup of multi-platform use of that as well. And we've actually ordered those for all teachers in the district, so that'll take a while to get those rolled out. But we're looking to contract out some people to help us with that to speed that process up. So that'll be happening pretty soon. And then we also know some of our devices are not to the quality level we'd like to have them be, and are causing some challenges. So Jerry and her team ordered a bunch more devices that just arrived last week, so those will start to be rolled out to replace the devices that are struggling as well, to do some of the things we need them to do. So those are just several examples of things we're looking to try to improve the online experience and the in-person experience to help kids and staff be more successful as well. So those are a couple of the things that we're looking at. And then the bottom line piece is teachers learn more about how do you teach effectively in this world, really is where the difference has been made. But the more barriers we can remove from them and the more resources we can provide them, the better they're going to be able to use their skill set to be successful. So that becomes the instructional coaching piece we'll continue to work with other coaches helping teachers and teachers helping teachers how to figure out what works and what doesn't work as they move forward too.
I did have one more question. When we look at this issue again, like in January, is it possible to look at, do you always want to look at 7 through 12 as one unit? Or are you open to looking at 7th and 8th graders separate from the high school? Because I think when
Yep.
you look at a building capacity piece, they're very different animals.
Correct. No, we could definitely look at them as two separate pieces. In fact, that's what Nathan and I did this time in our conversations with building principals and staff, was looking at 7, 8 as a separate piece than 9, 12. It just happens to be that our recommendation this time is the same. It would not have to be that. Different situations. One, the age of the students. It's obviously much different for a 7th grader to expect to be successful online every other day than a 12th grader. But also the space differences between what Excelsior and Oak Ridge can offer versus what the high school and number of students as well. So those could definitely be separated if we feel like that's appropriate for that time.
Appreciate the clarification.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Those are great questions.
I think any of that can be communicated to our families. These are the kinds of things that we've figured out that didn't work well, we're changing this. Any time that we can share what we've learned to show them that we're growing with the times, you might say, is probably not a bad idea, just so that they know that we are listening to them, we are listening to students, we are listening to staff, and we're trying to make it better for everyone.
I would
So-
second that,
Any-
absolutely.
Any communicating you can do of that, I think, is to our advantage.
I think regardless of how we come out here tonight, it'd be important to communicate to our secondary folks especially about what those changes will look like and how we plan to support going forward, and also get some feedback from them about how do we improve the practice that we're currently doing too. So I think that's a nice information blast / survey that we can do regardless to help us get some feedback from folks too. Now that everybody's had 6, 7 weeks of experience to help us move forward too.
I still feel like some of the, when we're talking about like changing the model, we're still in very like hypothetical, like esoteric terms right now. And it's, it's hard for me to say, okay, I'll just kind of like cross my fingers and hope for the best, without having, some more definitives and, knowing the challenges that we've already seen, thus far, so.
The one last thing I'd like to make as a comment is, I think it's important that we make this decision for the quarter, not just for 2 weeks or something. With everything being broken up, coming up, we have about, like you said, about 3 weeks or so, and then we have a break, and then we have so many and we have a break. It's very hard for administrators, for teachers, for everyone to plan ahead when they don't know, they're just getting there and they're just organized, and then, it may all change. So I think going in with the idea of at least going another quarter and then evaluate. And if we're seeing things are changing big time, if numbers are getting bad, of course we're going to come back and talk about it. That's part of what we've got this as a guideline for. But I think we need to let everyone start trying to plan ahead. Any other questions, comments, anything?
Not for me.
Okay. Then I think we can move on to do a motion, but I think it needs to state to approve the second quarter return to learn as discussed. I think we need to be more specific.
Agreed.
Okay, would someone want?
Yep.
I'll do it.
To make it with that stated?
I'll make a motion to approve the second quarter return to learn plan as recommended by Superintendent Bisgard, that we stay in the hybrid model through the end of second quarter.
For
7 to 12.
For
7 through
7-12.
12.
Sorry, for 7-12 and K-6 will remain as is,
Second.
in person, second quarter.
Okay, and seconded by
I was just
Carrie.
seconding your motion.
Thought you were telling me to keep talking.
No, you can if you want.
No, I'm good.
Keep going.
Okay,
Be the
so,
longest motion ever.
all those in favor say aye.
But we got a second, I'm sorry. Never mind.
Yeah, we
Yeah, I
did.
seconded.
Kara
Kara
did the
did.
second, yeah. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. So we'll move on to open enrollment requests.
I move to approve the open enrollment request as presented.
Second?
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes. Consent agenda approval.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
Okay, Karen Britt, all right. And to this time, we're going to look at it, and then we're going to vote on it before we go to communications.
I do have a question about contracts.
Sure, go for it.
Is our rental agreement for prom refundable?
It is.
I have
That was the
nothing.
first thing we clarified.
I was like, what?
Like, originally, we did not think it was, and then, yes, we have clarified that
Okay,
it is.
awesome.
Like, refundable or extendable to next.
Transferable to next year.
Yep.
Okay,
I'll highlight a couple of the contracts there for you briefly as well.
Okay.
The Marion Public Library one I
Good.
want to highlight because that's been kind of a work in progress for a while now. Essentially what that does is it's going to give all of our students access to the Marion Public Library. They will have a membership. They won't get an actual card. It'll be part of their student ID process, but really excited about it, the timing, especially with a lot of kids online or in hybrid world, and to be able to access those resources either in person or virtually as well. So I think that'll be a nice feature that we haven't been able to offer in the past, so I'm excited about that. And then the Sprout social one, just a quick highlight for you there. What Sprout is essentially it's a, I don't know, social media platform that allows us to do some things that we haven't been able to do and kind of coordinate our social media efforts and coordinate the different resources that we use, and also then provide some different metrics and some analytics that we haven't had the
Good.
capability of using as well. So
It's a really good platform.
we're excited to
Love
see
that.
what that can help
Yeah.
us with going forward, and sounds like Britt may have some experience with that, so that's good.
good,
So
good.
so I want to make sure to highlight those two, because they're a little bit different than some of the usual ones you may see on here.
I'm really excited that we're joining forces with the Marion Library. We've been kind of talking about that for years, and it's finally coming together. I think that's awesome. Is there any other discussion, questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we're to communications. If you can look to see Thursday, we have the Linn-Mar Foundation Dine Out for Schools, and there's a list that you can activate from your memo to figure out where the places are, but there's also one probably on the website, I would bet, Shannon?
I believe there
Okay.
is.
Okay.
If not, we'll make sure to get that
Okay,
there.
so that people can go to that and say, and I believe if I remember right, it was 10% to 25% of money spent will go to the foundation. You do have to indicate to wherever you're dining out that you want to be involved in that, so. Also, there's a board visit for Hazel Point on Thursday, so it's an active day. I have Barry, you are Marion City Council for November 5th,
Okay?
okay? And, let's see here.
Barry, I can do that one if you can do the 19th.
Perfect.
Okay.
I did talk to Steve Jensen, and they don't plan on going live for quite a while, so they're going to be
Okay.
virtual for
That
quite a
makes it
while.
even easier for me.
Interesting.
19th, you said, right?
Yeah, I'll do the 5th then.
All right, thank you both. All right. So is there anything else? We do have a policy committee meeting coming up along with CTE. And we do have the Iowa School Board Delegate Assembly, and some of us are going online with that. And so, anything else you'd like to share?
I just wanted to mention that the high school Key Club, they did a really nice trunk and treat event on Friday night, and I went, and it was really well done, and they were raising money for UNICEF, and I just wanted to
Fantastic.
kind of give them a shout out and tell them that they did a really good job. They built contraptions for social distancing to give candy, like tubes and table. It was really cute, and they did a really nice job. It was ridiculously cold and windy in the high school parking lot, but they were all out there, and they were really great with all the little kids. So I just wanted to give them a shout out and tell them they did a great job.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Just to, can I add to that a little bit too? I didn't go to that event, but the Key Club is part of the Kiwanis Club. And the young lady that, I'm sorry, is the regional, who's the district president now? Who ran that? Do you remember?
I just saw the social media
Okay.
thing and said
So
I
we
have an
have-
8-year-old.
We have the district president, and we have the national president that are students in our school.
Which is pretty awesome.
That's
Which is
pretty
excellent.
impressive, pretty impressive.
And I'll come up with those names, I have.
Okay.
My
Thank you.
apologies. So thanks for bringing that up. I saw that online. That was
Yeah,
good.
it was really fun, and we don't know what Halloween's gonna look like, and so I wanted to take advantage, and there were tons of kids in costumes, and they had 2 lanes of cars, and it was every other space, and they did even the high school kids all were dressed up in costumes, they decorated their trunks. It was really well done, and it was for a good cause, and so I wanted to shout it out.
I did come up with the name.
Fantastic.
Kylie Egbert
Oh, hey, Kylie.
is the
Kylie.
district
Hi, Kylie.
president, and Alex Dracos
Yeah,
is the national president.
that's not too bad. Yeah, awesome. All right, anyone else with something to share for communication? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all.
809.
8:09, thank you.
That was my first.
Huh?